Hi there team, Coach Alexa here, coach for Reading, South Oxfordshire and online. We've had another question in through the Virtual Running Club app and the Ask a Coach a Question option. Feel free to send things through that or via the Virtual Running Club Facebook page if you'll remember there. So this question is about a runner who's been having some bowel issues when running, so stopping and needing a bit of a loose poo. No changes to pre-run, during run fueling. Has happily run half marathons recently with no issues at all. So it's come on relatively suddenly. So the person who sent this question in is female. Didn't mention their age. So the reason I'm going to kind of raise that as a thing is that what suits us digestive wise as women, both during and around training and just in life in general, can actually change relatively dramatically as we approach the sort of era of our lives where we're perhaps pre-menopause, perimenopause, during menopause and post. So some quite significant changes going in our body that affect the foods that we are going to be digesting more or less easily, what our body wants and how it's dealing with them when running. So for the runner who sent this question if that feels like it's about that sort of age, maybe you kind of approaching your mid-40s or kind of moving through that time period of your life, then that's definitely worth something to think about. There's a book called Raw, O-R-A-R, by Dr. Stacey Sims, which is a fantastic resource on all of these changes that go on in our bodies around menopause and all sorts of other the female cycle and various different life stages for women, and which will give you some wonderful advice and tips on how to experiment and find out what works for you. So a couple of other things to think about is that the other biggest thing I've noticed in my runners and myself, and from research that I've done over the years that can impact our digestion other than the food which we eat, which I'll come on to in a second, is stress and lifestyle and anxiety and things like that. So when our body's in a stressed state, our digestive system is deprioritized and it naturally becomes more sensitive to the foods that previously were absolutely no problem at all. So it's easier to say than to then work out and work around, but do consider if there have been changes in your lifestyle that have caused higher stress, anxiety or worry levels, and are there things that you can perhaps do about that. In terms of foods, you didn't mention whether or not this was happening in other areas of your life. They're changed kind of bowel habits more in other senses, even slightly subtle ones. You mentioned that you were going to see a doctor about it, which of course is always a really, really sensible thing to do with any changes in our digestive habits. Get those checked out, so that's really good to hear. But it might be worth thinking about some of the things that can cause us to need a bit of a poo, and the biggest things are fibre. Highly spiced foods, even in the 24 to 48 hours before, and high fat foods. So thinking about maybe what you're eating the night before, the day before, a longer run, and whether they tick any of those boxes. And also, you mentioned that oats has suited you well for many a year. Oats are relatively high fibre still, and fibre it also speeds up our digestive transit in exactly the same way as running does. So combining the two might be something to think about, just tweaking or changing to something that's a lower fibre option. You mentioned a white bagel, which is a good alternative. Something that's maybe slightly quicker release carbs and less fibre content. Something that also has worked for a couple of runners that I've worked with over the years is doing overnight oats. So by soaking the oats overnight, either in water or milk or whatever it is that you have your porridge made with, whatever liquid you use, overnight just breaks down some of that fibre and some of the starches a little bit for us before we eat it. So that can be a useful thing maybe to experiment with as well. But thinking about that fibre content of your carbohydrates pre and any during run, and also again the night before. Fibre kind of bulks out what we eat. It speeds up digestive transit. Running, it speeds up digestive transit. So sometimes combining the two, and also things that might be more irritating to the gut, like spices and fats. So a few areas to think about there, but you're doing absolutely the right thing to try and pop and see a doctor. Yeah, hopefully there are some useful tips. And as I say, if you're reaching that sort of middle era of our lives where pre-menopause, perimenopause might start being a thing, do look up Raw, the book by Dr. Stacey Sims, because there are a lot of digestive and food related changes that go on in our bodies at that point in women's lives. I hope that's useful. Happy running.